I'm Mitch McCracken, and this is Memphis Music Interview. This week's guest is Steve Cobb. Now, Steve has played with the Memphis Horns, Al Green, Waylon Jennings, and the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, among others. Welcome to the show, Steve. And tell me, I know that you've been recording and performing in Memphis for years, but are you from here?
I was born in Tupelo, Mississippi.
You too?
Down the road a piece. And there was another, not as... you may never heard of him. His name was Elvis. Yeah. And that little, what's the museum now? That used to be the Elvis Presley Youth Center.
Oh, really?
And I used to play school dances there. Naturally, I was influenced by Elvis. Mm-hmm. And another thing that influenced me was every week on TV, Ricky Nelson came into my living room. And I watched him at the end of the show do one. And I remember thinking, I could do that. So I started playing, naturally, school dances and youth centers and functions. And then the other side of that was I was way too young and had no business in these places, but I played some all-black establishments underage.
And where was that, in Tupelo?
In Tupelo.
Yeah.
A couple of black clubs. And then the flip side of that was I would play just redneck, honky-tonk, blood on the floor places. And that's when I think I really knew that I had it into me that I wanted to be a musician. All my friends were saying, come on, we're going to the drive-in, we're doing this, we're meeting something. No, I got a gig. I'd either be in a black club or a honky-tonk playing Merle Haggard songs. And then, the other thing was I'd play the school dances and be the cool kid on campus the next week too.
And so, when'd you leave Tupelo?
After high school.
Oh, okay.
Left and kind of went on the road playing. There was a couple of people I worked with in Tupelo that I first got into recording, and I thought, I like this. I used to play some with a guy named Gene Simmons, who had a $1 million haunted house. So I'd tour with him and do some recording, and then a couple of artists. Sam Phillips actually had Trace Records there with Ray Harris, Homer Ray Harris, who used to be at High. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of artists I played on some albums there, Smith Vincent and some other guy I can't remember. But, Sam Phillips was actually there. That's the first time I met him was in Tupelo. And so, roundaboutly, I was in a band called Cottonmouth. It was pretty much a white soul band.
Mm-hmm. I remember Cottonmouth.
Kind of in the disco era, a little kind of era of Wild Cherry, funky music, all that kind of stuff. And so we got signed to RCA Records. And I wound up in Memphis, and the Memphis Horns were on RCA as well. And so they played horns on the record, and they were a horn band, needed a rhythm section. We were a rhythm section, needed a horn band. So we wound up being the rhythm section for Memphis Horns touring band. Long story short, groups break up. Those guys moved back away. I stayed in Memphis and continued to work with the Memphis Horns with a new lineup and toured them for probably a couple more years. And we'd go out and open shows for everybody from Bootsy Collins, Ohio Players, Bar-Kays Can Function, Frankie Beverly and Mays, Dorothy Moore, Manhattan's Dramatics. So I really got to be on the road and see these people in action and stand 25 feet away in the wings and watch a guy like Frankie Beverly work his magic and learn a lot.
Well, I saw an interview with Wayne Jackson, and he was talking about the Memphis Horns, even though they were known to be a Stax, affiliated with Stax. He said that he learned all of his moves from watching Willie Mitchell and the Four Kings playing over at the Plantation Inn.
And Willie used those guys on a lot of records. I played and toured with them, and I actually did one album with them and played bass on. And through James Mitchell, who was in the Memphis Horns, took me down to Willie Mitchell's. Mm-hmm. So I did a session there, and Willie liked what I played, and he goes, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, well, nothing. He said, can you stay a little longer? So after I cut these two songs, he played this. He said, tell me what you think of this. And he played this artist. And so he said, I'm going to get you to play on this. And he sat there and hit erase and erased the bass player on 5 tracks.
Wow.
I stayed all afternoon. And from that, I went to playing in the rhythm section there. And we got a deal with actually Bearsville Records, which was Albert Grossman. It was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. And he used to manage Bob Dylan and Janis Joplin. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Right.
A very heavyweight. So I got to meet all those people, go to New York, hang out some. And Albert Grossman put me on retainer to be available to be the bass player at Willie's. It was an odd connection. And so I wound up playing on the last album. Remember those, vinyl?
Yeah.
The last album Willie Mitchell ever made. And the roster of Bearsville artists. I worked with Paul Butterfield, who I toured with and did an album with him, and he recorded one of my songs. Another thing, fond memories, aside from opening all those R&B acts, Memphis Horns played with the Doobie Brothers and toured with them a lot. So we got to open for the Doobie Brothers.
Oh, wow.
And I got to meet all those guys. This was back,
Now, didn't you record with Michael McDonald at
yeah,
some point?
Yeah, we're on the same album there with Matter of fact, the Memphis Horns cut Minute by Minute, which Michael McDonald did before they ever did it.
Oh, really?
There's a version on that album.
Wow.
And matter of fact, we played here at the Coliseum, and Memphis Horns opened the show, and then the Doobie Brothers. And of course, Andrew played, he's the saxophone taking it to the streets and all of that
right.
stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
and
God.
A Lot of Love, Nicolette Larson and all that. That's Andrew Love on all that.
Yeah.
And they did Rod Stewart, Sting, everybody. But so after the show, I had to go down to Ardent to do some more recording with Cottonmouth, and Skunk Baxter comes down and says, I'm going to play guitar. So I've got this song that Skunk Baxter's playing guitar all over all for free.
I interviewed Steely Dan, and Michael McDonald and Skunk Baxter both played on some of the Steely Dan albums before they went to the Doobie Brothers.
Right.
Yeah, but Skunk Baxter is great, man, and Michael McDonald's voice is just phenomenal.
I saw Willie Hall a couple of months ago, and he said he had some recording of us. I remember us doing a live broadcast, FM 100 broadcast at the old Ritz, which it's called the Vine or something now, but that used to be a venue there. And I remember us doing a couple of nights. It was Memphis Horns, and I was playing with them, and with Cottonmouth and Booker T, the MGs, and we were all three doing the show. We did 2 nights there, and it was recorded and broadcast. Played on Jesse Winchester album of his. I played on a top 40 hit. Matter of fact, his only top 40 hit song called Say What. Those were good times.
What did Willie Mitchell like about your playing that he didn't like about the tracks that he erased?
I don't know. I have an individual style. I can play it simple, but I can also throw some spice in the mix. And I just brought the tracks to life, he said. I was just kind of laying there, so. He liked that, and we worked together for a lot of years off and on. Then wound up doing some things in Nashville. I started playing with Tony Joe White. Did an album with him and wrote a title cut on one of his albums called Dangerous.
What year was this?
That would have been probably 83.
Oh, okay.
82, 83 or 4, yeah. I toured a lot with him in France, and I had a little moderate hit over there that I wrote with him, and did some French TV videos and concerts over there. And through him, wound up doing things in Nashville, and wound up getting to play with Waylon Jennings. Did a year tour. It was a package tour, kind of a country version of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I guess it was Waylon, Jesse Coulter, the Crickets, and Tony Joe White. So we were on the road for a little over a year, and rode the same buses, same hotels, and just part of the tour package, and got to play and all those guys at different times, and know all those people. And he called me the cowboy rock and roller.
Okay.
But
so Waylon was easy to get along with?
He was for me. He intimidated a lot of people. And he did me the first couple of months like I wouldn't say anything. He's I've gotten to play with a lot of famous people and big names. He's the only one that I think ever made me kind of cautious at first. I was afraid to talk, afraid to say anything. And But he wound up being very complimentary of me, and, got to know him through the years. Even after I worked with him, would see him from time to time, and he was always very cordial.
I heard a story about him. I don't know if it's true or not. He played bass for the Crickets.
Right.
And he was...
Well, he played bass with Buddy Holly.
Right. Oh, yeah, after the Crickets. Right. He was there the night that the music died.
Right.
And gave up his spot on the plane to the Big Bopper. Story has it...
Actually, he gave up his spot to Buddy. Waylon told me this story firsthand.
Oh, cool. Okay.
That Buddy was sick, and they had been traveling around. He didn't have any clean clothes. Traveling and touring wasn't as glamorous as it can be today.
Right.
You were out there roughing it a lot. And Buddy was getting sick, and the bus, I think the heating had some problems with the heater or something. So he felt sorry for Buddy. Said, man, they took turns because there's only so many seats on the plane with all the package tour. So he gave up his seat to Buddy so that he could get there, get some rest for the show, and do his laundry. And he said that this haunted him, the rest of, I guess, Waylon's life. He said he remembered the last thing he said to Buddy. Buddy said something like, well, I hope your bus breaks down or something like that, just joking. And Waylon said, well, I hope your old plane crashes. Mm-hmm. And he said that just, haunted him.
Right.
The rest of all those years. He told me that it really messed him around. That was what he said. And he said it was just a lighthearted joke, I hope your bus breaks down. I hope your plane crashes. But he said it really, he regretted saying that.
So how long did you play with Waylon?
Well, like I said, it was a package thing to where we were all rotating. And then even before I was on the road with him, Waylon would come to Tony's shows and just ride to the gig with us. And he'd show up with us unannounced.
Oh, really? Really?
We'd ride in a Cadillac. Tony had a big old Cadillac, Fleetwood, and Eldorados and stuff like that. And we'd go to the gig, and then we'd keep Waylon in the dressing room. And, of course, the promoter would be furious. Why didn't you tell me, Well, because, you would have, capitalized on it, and it wasn't about that. It was just about friendship and hanging out.
Right.
So, in the middle of Tony said, well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a friend we're going to bring out now. And Waylon would come walking across the stage, and the place would go nuts.
Yeah.
But that tour, I did all of 81, did a little bit in 80 with him, and then pretty much all of 81. And then the very beginning of 82, my twins were born then. I had twin sons. And around that time, I was still playing some with Tony, but I went out on the road with Paul Butterfield and did that for a year. And I remember kind of missing my twins' first birthday with Paul, and he flew me back home and be with the kids. And it wasn't too long after that I kind of thinned back my road duties and learned how to make a living here in town.
And how'd you do that?
Well, a little songwriting, a little studio work, and I had never really played clubs up until that point. So it was like a whole new experience. Came here playing in, like I said, the Memphis Horns, Cottonmouth, Tony Joe, Waylon, Paul, and all that. And then we put a band together called the Blue Beats, a couple of distant cousins of mine, and it was one of the top bands for a lot of years through the 80s here. But I would still take time off from that, being, friends and family. I'm going for 3 weeks with Paul Butterfield. I'll be back. And then, we'd get another bass player to play while I was gone.
How did you hook up with Jack Rowell?
Gosh, how did I hook up with Jack Rowell? I was doing some of the casino gigs at the Horseshoe Casino, and he used to play there as well. And I had a guitar player who abruptly left, so I called Jack up, and it just was a good fit, and we used to make a lot of money down there back in the heyday of that place. And it was a way to go down and make good money, but sleep in my own bed every night.
Right.
I was a single dad for about 10 years, and
wow,
I couldn't go out on the road and do what I used to do.
Right.
I always say it was around that time I traded a career for a job. I don't take being a father lightly, and I'm also a father to two stepchildren of mine now, young. I've started over again.
Right. How old are they?
They're 15 and 13.
Wow.
And I also have an older stepson, my twin's half-brother. So they all call me Dad or Pops, something I enjoy.
Yeah,
Keeps
that's
me
great.
young.
So now, how long were you with Paul Butterfield?
I worked with him intermittently off and on through, like I said, I did an album with him. I first maybe started around 1980 and 81 with him. Then he calls up out of the blue. He used to call me up and go, "Hey, I'll put somebody on the phone." It'd be somebody like Paul Schaefer or somebody.
Yeah.
And he said, just talk to me. He said, I told him, "You're the only bass player I ever met from Mississippi that played in tune." He was used to all those old blues guys, you know.
Uh-huh.
But he called me up to do a tour with him. I was down in Florida, and I came straight home, got on a plane, went to New York, and we played a lot up in, New York City and upstate New York, and all around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And being with him, you got to play other people. Everybody wanted to play with Paul.
Uh-huh.
And everybody wanted to come hang out. There were lots of actors and actresses. Like I got to meet, Richard Gere, Jodie Foster, and all these people.
Wow.
And also getting to play with other blues legends like John Lee Hooker.
Mm-hmm.
Or being out in a place like San Francisco. We'd play the Stone, the Keystone, and all these places, Chinatown there. And all these old hippie bands would come out from the 60s. And I'd get to play with guys like John, maybe mispronounce his last name, Cipollina. He was a guitar player in Quicksilver Messenger Service, and we're playing there at the Stone, famous, club there, concert club, and him and Nick Gravenides from the original Paul Butterfield Band, Mark Knaflin, all these people coming out, John Lee Hooker, and I'm looking around next to these guys that when I was a kid I used to listen to their records,
Mm-hmm.
So
And that's got to be a pretty good feeling.
yeah. And then, I got to play, through the years, got to play with all kind of people, very varied, artists. James Carr, went to tour with him in Japan. And, people like Rufus Thomas, getting to play with him, Bo Diddley, the Shirelles, used to do some of those Dick Clark oldies, rock and roll package tours. And got to know Dick Clark.
What was he like?
Genuine, nice man, a gentleman.
And
yeah. What struck me about him was he was always the same on stage or off, in the dressing room or in the show. I couldn't tell the difference between, it was seamless. I got the impression that he was Dick Clark.
Right. Well, now you recorded with Al Green too, right?
Yes, I actually played on 2 of his albums, and both were nominated for Grammys. And actually, one of the singles I played on, Ocean Blue, I'll Rise Again, played bass on that, and that won a Grammy in 1984, Best Soul Gospel. And after all these years, finally getting a parchment for both of those albums. He Is the Light and I'll Rise Again.
Wow.
I came across that. I recently had some medical issues. I had vocal cord cancer, surgery, and radiation. So with that came a lot of bills.
Yeah.
And NARAS, the Grammy people, have a Music Cares program, and they assisted me somewhat with that. And through the process of applying, you have to meet criteria, play on so many albums, which I did, and they found out that I played on Grammys. So they're all about the Grammys, and after all these years, I'm finally going to.
Wow, that's
I'm not
great.
going to get an actual Grammy, but I'll get something for the wall.
Right, right. Well, now, do you want to talk about your cancer?
Well, I like to think I'm in remission. Matter of fact, 2 days from now, I go back to the doctor. I have to go once a month, and they put a camera down there, unpleasant, and look at things. But everything, he said, looked like the way I wanted it to look. He said, I'll put it this way, and he put up the video from the first day I was in, side by side with the one from last month, and it looked like night and day. My voice still gets dry from the radiation, kind of burning me up in there. But I don't know how I got it. I'm not really a smoker. Maybe a lifetime of secondhand smoke.
That could be. That very well could be.
With all the additives and preservatives in our food these days,
right.
Pesticides, so who knows?
Yeah.
But I'm doing well with it, and I'm healing, getting stronger.
Yeah.
my vocal cord isn't fully opening. It's about a quarter of it's shut where the cancer was. It's an opening, so it's affecting my voice somewhat. But I'm on the mend, and I'm going to do nothing but get stronger.
Yeah, well, I was so taken back when I was at Neil's, and after you'd had your treatments, and I knew that you were getting better. But when I heard you sing, it was like then I knew.
If I pick and choose my songs and my register I'm singing in,
right,
like I can do a good Johnny Cash.
Yeah,
I've lost my falsetto, and hopefully that'll come back when my vocal cords fully open and I fully heal. But I bought me a new microphone. Matter of fact, came today. I ordered, so I must be planning on singing again.
Yeah,
so
no kidding.
I'm doing nothing but being positive.
Right. Well, that's all you can do, but man, I was just so glad to hear you singing again. Now, you are not only are you a good bass player, you sound good, but you're fun to watch. I mean, it's like you don't even know that people are watching you.
Wow.
It's just you're an entertainer, and there's very few people who can play the bass. That's fun to watch. Amy LaVere comes to mind.
I think that the music just gets in me. I'm unconscious of it. It's
right.
not like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Right.
Music moves me. It always has. My son, I've been told, plays a lot like me and moves like me. My son Ian plays bass, and I go to hear him sometime. I look and go, so that's what I look like.
Yeah,
I can tell he's got the same mannerisms.
Yeah, but see, and you can tell that you're not consciously doing this or that, that you're into the music, and but that's what makes it fun to watch.
Well, like I said, the music's in me, and it moves me. I remember being a child. My first experiences with music were my parents had what do you call them? The old stereos, console stereos.
Right.
And they would have their little parties and play cards and have a few drinks with their friends and play records. Mm-hmm. And my bedroom was on the other side of the wall of the stereo. So what did I hear through the wall? The bass.
Yeah.
And before I even knew what made that sound, I would pick that out. And I remember my first instrument was actually a saxophone, school band and all. But then, of course, pop groups came out and everything. And it's like, man, I got to get a guitar. I did that, but I found myself picking out the boom, 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 because that's what I was drawn to before I even knew what made that sound. I liked that.
Well, now, some of these recordings that you were talking about, in addition to playing bass, you also play drums, right?
Drums, percussion, and so occasionally vocals and some, songwriting, some varied credits.
Well, now, let me ask you a question. I've never asked anybody this, but when you go to hear a band, how critical are you?
My first thing is I'm real open. I know I have a lot of friends who can be very critical, but I'm very supportive. I'm non-competitive, even among other bass players. Some of my best friends are bass players. Mm-hmm. Dave Smith is a great friend of mine. Leo Goff is a great friend of mine. And there's just no competition at all.
That's great.
Hey, I can't do this gig. Will you do it for me? And so I've never felt competitive. I'm there to cheer people on.
Yeah, and I remember when I worked at the Pig, we were playing Johnny Lang, "Lie to Me,"
right?
And Jack Holder and Dave Smith were playing on that album,
right?
And I noticed it, and so I would mention it. I always try to mention Memphis musicians, even when I'm not in Memphis. I worked a lot in Las Vegas and New Orleans and other places, but
yeah, I've done some things with Jack as well. Great guitarist. Another guitarist I work with a lot is Nico Liris. We do some writing together, and he owns a studio, and I do some recording.
That's right. Now what was that you and Nico and Jimmy Jamison did? Was it a Blind Faith song?
Yeah, that was after the tsunami. There's a video on YouTube. I think it's under Jimmy Jamison Supports Japan, and they did this DVD and had artists support and donate, to the tsunami relief in Japan. And I know Paul Rogers from Bad Company did it. Glenn Tilbrook from Squeeze, Roseanne Cash, Keith Emerson, Jimmy Jameson.
Let me ask you, Steve, when you write, do you sit down to do that, or does an idea come to you? How does that work?
Well, I always get the ideas, and then I jot them down, and then I sit down to write. Mm-hmm. But I usually don't start with a blank page. I start with an idea that I've had, or sometimes it's one line, two lines, sometimes it's a verse, sometimes it's a chorus. I'm in the middle of putting a package together, a little presentation. Nashville is right up the road. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of industry left in Memphis, but we got talent galore. Uh-huh. And I've been trying to put a little publishing package together, a little
well,
catalog.
I tell you that the song that you did with Vicki Loveland.
Yeah, that was on the Memphis Music Sampler. That was my demo, and Johnny Walker heard that and said, "Can I put this on this sampler?" She said, I had it, and I played it on my radio program, and the phones kept lighting up. Every time I play it, people call in and want me to play that song. Mm-hmm. And so she was very supportive. I said, "Sure, put it on there."
That is a hit record. I mean, that is such a good song. We probably should mention the name of it.
It's called Kiss Me. And Vicki is singing lead on that. And I co-wrote that. I wrote most of the lyrics, but I also had a couple of co-writers on that. And Nico helped me with the music. And then Anna Melvin is a co-writer on that as well. And that's one of the songs that's in this package. I was on the verge of going to Nashville, had appointments, and then I got my diagnosis. So I hit a speed bump, but now that I'm getting well, that's on my agenda in the next month or two is to pick up where I left off. And I've got a lot of songs to take up there. Right. It's silly to ignore Nashville, and a lot of it is country, but I write R&B, pop, country, blues, But Nashville is still a big market and still has an industry there.
Now, have you done world tours?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've played Japan, France, Greece, Greenland.
Well, now, people look at Memphis music differently in those areas, don't you think?
And they're very aware of Memphis music, and especially years back when I was playing on a lot of the old vinyl and 45s, as I'm showing you here, the stack has a lot of credits, and you can actually read and it says who wrote what, who played what, who produced what. And I kind of miss that. Yeah. In the downloading days, you don't get all that information. Mm-hmm. First time I was aware of that, I was in Japan, and people were saying, I say, the record you played on with the Memphis Horns, I saw your name on this and that, or, and that was the first time I became aware. And then the same in France. A few years ago, I was in Greece, and matter of fact, I was there with Nico, and we were getting ready to play this place, Club Jazz, that night. We had a pretty international band, I think a Polish drummer, Czechoslovakian keyboard player, a Greek guy, and the ugly American. And so I hear Nico in the other room, and I hear him speaking in Greece, but I hear my name. And he comes, he said, "You're not going to believe that." This journalist and promoter guy said, he translated, he says, "I'm sitting here holding a record by Tony Joe White, and the Steve Cobb that's playing tonight, is this the same one that wrote this song and then played bass?" And, so anyway, you go around the world and suddenly people know who you are. And in Memphis, I can't get arrested, but you go over there and people are aware of things you've done and songs you've written, and they familiar with your credits.
I've talked to so many people who talk about the respectability of Memphis musicians, and it kind of blows me away. And kind of decided that a lot of people in Memphis just take Memphis music for granted. Right. They don't realize that there's not this kind of caliber of musicians in other cities.
Right. We're much more appreciated abroad than we are in town. Right. But I've been fortunate to work with all these people. And one of my dear friends, I hadn't mentioned him yet, but I used to, after he was in Bread, Jimmy Griffin was the guitarist in Bread. And I played on a lot of his solo records after Bread. Did Lonely Girls, a single he did. And then I did an album, played on about, I think, 4 songs on was Griffin and Sylvester, and it was Jimmy Griffin from Bread and Terry Sylvester from the Hollies, who replaced Graham Nash.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from being one of the greatest singers on the planet, and he could write a song too. Guy, he won an Oscar for All We Know, the Carpenters. He
Right.
wrote that. And but he was just a great friend of mine. He'd gone on to Nashville. I used to go up, stay with him, and we'd do some writing up there. And again, we were kind of testing the waters on doing something, and then he wound up with lung cancer. And, but I miss him daily. He was a sweetheart of a man and a dear friend to me, and one of the greatest talents I ever worked with.